All right, my friends, welcome back. Thank you all for the love you showed me on tiers 1 and 2 for this iceberg. We are going right along to tier 3, shallow waters. This is where it gets crazy. This is where I got to look things up because I haven't heard of them. This is where it gets juicy. So we're going to jump right in. Tier 3, shallow waters. The first anvil. So to craft any metal object, including anvils, you need a functional forge, which in turn, that forge needs an anvil. That begs the question, it's a very basic chicken or the egg, although I never liked that one because obviously like dinosaur eggs came before chickens, so obviously the egg. It's kind of a causality error based on the rules of Dwarf Fortress. You need an anvil to make an anvil. You should bring an anvil. If you forget somehow, if you do like a custom embark and you don't bring an anvil, you better get one from the merchant or some merchant because you can't make an anvil without an anvil. And so the first anvil is a philosophical question within Dwarf Fortress. It's like, where did that first anvil come from if you can't make an anvil without an anvil? So there are theories and plausible ones within Dwarf Fortress, I would say. Strange moods can produce any kind of item. So maybe some brilliantly insane dwarf, and I assume people know what strange moods are, you know, it's where a dwarf kind of is stricken with some genius idea, and then they'll make any item out of like random material. So people are saying maybe the first anvil was made by like a dwarf in a strange mood, and they made it out of bone or stone or wood or something, and that was the first anvil that would solve the paradox. Others say the first anvil was a gift to the world by Armok himself. In the last iceberg, we talked about Armok. He is the god above gods. He is the godhead of Dwarf Fortress, and he also kind of represents the player themselves. So, and you know, the coders who made it. So in that way, it is true. Armok, we the humans who gaze down on this reality, we made the first anvil somehow through magic. Dwarven milk and dwarven cheese. This is a little bit of a gross one. This is one I didn't like to learn about when I first learned about it. But basically, you know, you can milk anything almost in Dwarf Fortress that's a mammal, and you can turn that into cheese. So, you know, in Dwarf Fortress, it's a kind of like grimdark universe. So, you know, don't be offended by dog cheese, horse cheese. Dwarven milk and dwarven cheese does not come from dwarves. Dwarven milk and dwarven cheese actually come from a worse source, in my opinion, although I've never tasted it, so maybe it's really good. There are these things deep in the lowest caverns. You know, you start your embark, you dig down, you find like 1 cavern, 2 caverns, 3 caverns, and then you find the circus at the center of the earth, basically. So in these secondary and tertiary caverns, like pretty close to the core of the earth, to the circus at least, there are these things called purring maggots, and it's as good as it sounds. It is a large, vibrating, noise-emitting larvae creature, and these can be milked, I'm sorry to tell you. I believe it a vermin catcher. I believe that's one of the main functions of the vermin catcher or vermin working workshop. I could be wrong. It might be another farming workshop. Correct me in the comments. Oh, yeah, get that out of the way early. If I say anything wrong, or if you have anything to add, I love comments. I answer everybody, so write me about it. But, so yeah, purring maggots, short version. Already spending too much time on this. It's kind of gross. Dwarven milk and cheese are actually the products of the purring maggots that we find down deep in the earth if we choose to harvest those things, and it is valuable. It's apparently especially delicious. This write-up also mentions it may be inspired by Kasum Marzu, which is a Sardinian and Corsican cheese known for being made via a process that does involve actual insect larvae. All right, I'm moving on. I don't even want to talk about this one. I don't like dwarven cheese personally. No, that's disgusting. In adventure mode, if you try to make your adventurer do something they find particularly repulsive, such as drink some material like blood or mud. All right, my stomach's still turning from the dwarven cheese, so I'm not going to give too many examples, but the adventurer will refuse certain things and they'll say, no, that's disgusting. They'll just say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not a good idea. I refuse to do it. However, this is what makes it kind of interesting. If your adventurer is starving, they may change their mind and eventually just eat it. Eat the thing that they would normally refuse. There's some discussion about this kind of thing leading to a more fleshed out form of adventurer's morality, where you wouldn't be able to force an adventurer to do things they disagree with without altering their ethics first. All right, this next one, you're going to have to look at the screen or pick up on the innuendo. If you have an issue with the way I describe this, take it up with YouTube. Dwarves committing chop suey. There are several situations in which a dwarf will commit actual chop suey. Notably, if they turn melancholic, a type of insanity that can be triggered by either being depressed for too long or not being able to complete a strange mood in time, either in Fortress mode or during World Gen, or a liaison that is locked in and forgotten during a meeting. So basically, the dwarves that have been assigned a purpose in life, or their mood has gotten so low that it's essentially the same, they've been denied their destiny, or just situation is so bad that they feel an equivalency. A dwarf will seek out ways to chop their own suey by jumping off a cliff, going into magma, or jumping into deep water to drown. If no suitable spot can be found, they will simply starve or dehydrate themselves to death. I ran into this a lot. Nowadays, when I run DF Hack, I run Fast Dwarf, and I keep huge stockpiles, every strange mood resolves in a legendary item. Obviously, that's like the preferred. And with DF Hack, you can also like get into their mood a little bit and get more clues about what they need if they are missing something. So nowadays, I don't let strange moods ever go to waste. But back in the day, I would have a lot of dwarves that... There's like 3 main types of insanity. Oh, yeah, I think I talked about that in other videos. I'm going to actually expand this one a little bit and talk about the 3 types of strange mood insanity are they will fly into a rage, they'll become berserk, they'll start attacking everyone else, and then they'll be struck down because they're like a rabid dog kind of thing. Or they'll get melancholy and they'll just stop eating, stop talking to people, stop doing things, and they'll eventually starve or die of dehydration. They basically go catatonic, except that they're still kind of like milling around. And we're going to talk about catatonia too, actually. So put a pin in that. And then the third one is stark babbling mad, which is where they're just running around babbling. But it has the same effect as melancholy, where they're basically just running in circles, moving in circles at some speed, and not interacting in any meaningful way until they starve to death or dehydrate. Anyway, we're talking about chop suey. So to a lesser extent, stark raving mad and catatonic dwarves, 2 other types of insanity, there you go, we just talked about, will let themselves starve or dehydrate to death without actively seeking out their own death, although stark raving mad dwarves will wander aimlessly while ignoring any and all hazards they encounter while milling about. So melancholic is the only one where they will seek it. I didn't realize that, where they will rush the process. Oh, that is interesting. I hadn't seen that. My melancholic guys tend to just walk in a circle and it's not that different from like stark raving mad or catatonic, but apparently there's some code for them to actually make trouble for themselves in that way to speed things along. So I didn't know that. Ice oceans are hostile. So this is about, basically, it's kind of the hardest embark you can possibly go on. So like evil biomes are obviously very challenging. Glaciers, like totally ice covered places, like you don't get trees, you don't get plants, it's very difficult. If you have temperature on, it affects things. You can't get running water, it makes it very difficult. And you're not supposed to be able to embark on pure ocean tiles, but DF Hack lets you embark wherever you want. You can embark closer to existing cities. I recommend that if you haven't tried that, because you can get like prefab buildings and stuff. You can do a lot of cool things with the DF Hack, like letting you embark in places you shouldn't logically do. But so if you go to the middle of a frozen ocean, then you can walk on it, of course. Although this notes that, I've never tried this, but apparently you have to disable cave-ins, because if dwarves step on the ice at all, or even if it just loads in because you're not supposed to be there, you're not supposed to be able to embark there, the ice will collapse under its own weight immediately, and then you'll just be in pure ocean and you can't build or do anything. But so you have to disable cave-ins and then usually use GUI tile types, use some other hacking to build like a support pillar in the middle. Oh, that's why it all caves in immediately, is because when it renders in, it counts it as literally nothing is holding it up. It's just floor that shouldn't exist, and it immediately collapses. So you need at least like a 1 block pillar so that the game can like check down and be like, oh, it's being held up by something. Yeah, so you have to do that. You have to turn off cave-in, build that pillar, usually with more hacking, because your dwarves usually can't get down there. And then once you're on there, it is the hardest biome imaginable, because it is a 1 layer thick, 1 Z level thick layer of ice with just pure saltwater, hostile, sharks and everything, whatever, maybe giant undead whale, for example. So you can't really dig down, so it's just impossible. And nothing grows on the ice either. There's no plants or wood, so it's just like, what are you supposed to do? So basically, if you want to, the game prevents you from doing this, but if you want to hack it in, you can stunt stupidly in the most inhospitable place on Earth that would normally collapse immediately as soon as you play it.
Angels. Angels are creatures created during world generation. They guard vaults, usually in adventure mode. I mean, hypothetically, you could build a fortress with hacks that was close enough to a vault to examine it, but that would be glitchy. We're talking like things that are canon within Dwarf Fortress. So angels, basically, it will be some kind of giant. It's randomly kind of procedurally generated. It'll be like a giant scorpion with some vibrant colors. Could be a giant rodent. Could be a hamster. There's several levels of angels. There's like small ones that look like humanoid shadows, and they'll mess you up. The whole point is that this is like endgame for adventure mode, where like if you can somehow possibly get into a demonic vault and claim the demon slab. It says here in the write-up, it says, whoever reads it can enslave or banish the associated goblin master demon who was brought to the world by the god who created these angels. That's a little bit too deep lore for me. I'm not sure exactly what that is. What that means exactly. Just tag something in Legends mode where it's like, yes, there was this goblin master demon who existed since the dawn of time, but then you, the adventurer, got this slab and activated it and banished them from this world. So you like permanently banished a demon, a major demon, basically, a dark god. But to do that, you have to get through angels, and there's like 3 or 4 different levels of angels. They're all exceptionally hard to kill, and in fact, in the description text, it'll say something like, their role in destiny is intrinsic. It says something like, they are of a part with destiny, like, and it'll also say like the angel is never surprised or bothered by anything. So like you're basically fighting just like this unstoppable homunculus, just a real murderous homunculus. But it'll be like a giant grasshopper or a giant scorpion or like a chinchilla. Chinchilla is what I was thinking of, you know, because I've seen demons shaped like chinchillas. In one of my earlier videos, there's like a 50-foot tall ash and fire and soot chinchilla. Things like that. Imagine like the way it makes demons, where it'll like just pick a big animal and give them all the powers, make them basically unkillable. Angels are basically the flip side of that. They will guard these ultimate final dungeons in adventure mode. They exist in fortress mode, but you can't get close enough under normal non-cheating circumstances, and it's kind of like a final boss. You kill an angel, you get the slab. I've never done this. Based on this description, it sounds like it'll add something to Legends. It'll say your adventurer banished a demon as old as the world is. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty neat. All right, next entry is Dwarven incest. We're not going to spend too much time on this. Basically, romantic and familial morals are kind of from the Middle Ages, and basically you can't marry your own nuclear family, but nephews and nieces and uncles and aunts and things like that, they tend to be those marriages tend to happen between dwarves. So it's a little incesty by modern standards. Dwarven rain phobia. So if you've played Dwarf Fortress at all, you're familiar with this, you know what this is. But it used to be a lot worse, actually. It had to be fine-tuned, it had to be dialed in, because dwarves in the earliest would be like so traumatized. Dwarves love getting misted by a waterfall. They love mist from any source, but raindrops drive them crazy. They get super, super upset. It is like the worst thing that happened to you. I'm trying to think of like all the dwarves and all of the reactions I've seen, like how upset they get. It's like you just made your lunch and you're ready, you're about to sit down and eat it, and you trip and you throw it all over the floor. So now you don't have lunch and you have a mess to clean up. That's the mood effect I would describe as equivalent to like dwarves getting wet from rain at all. Even though, again, mist and waterfall generators, they love. You can actually even it out. A dwarf will be like, I don't even see the point anymore. What's the point of even being here? Because I got caught in the rain and now I'm slightly wet. And then they'll like walk through a waterfall and be like, you know what? I feel totally better. I got wet in the different way that I prefer. But it used to be worse. It used to be to the point before it got dialed in a little better that like a dwarf caught in the rain would remember it for the rest of his life, would be traumatized by it. It would like, the way they describe it in this write-up, they talk about like it sets them on a course to eventual madness. Even if they have a good rest of their life and like they're pretty mentally resilient, like that trauma will never leave them and will slip them slowly towards madness no matter what. But you don't have to worry about that these days as much. They get rained on and then they get waterfalled on, and as long as they have a good meal or have a good sleep after that, they're usually okay. Slaves to Armok, God of Blood, Chapter 1. So Slaves to Armok, God of Blood, Chapter 1 is the original game. This was a game never too well developed, but it was the proof of concept. It built the engine that Dwarf Fortress would eventually run in. So if you caught the Tier 1 and Tier 2 Iceberg, you saw that Dwarf Fortress is technically called Slaves to Armok, God of Blood, Chapter 2, Dwarf Fortress. And the story behind that is, in about 2004, they started, the brothers Adams started coding their first game, designing their first game, and that was Slaves to Armok, God of Blood, Chapter 1. It was kind of like roguelike, but they built the engine, and then as a side project, they were like, okay, we have all this good code, we have all this interesting procedural code, just try to use it in a more productive, immediately fun way, and that is Chapter 2, that is Dwarf Fortress. That's the whole thing we're talking about today. So Dwarf Fortress is actually a sequel to a game that was developed actively from like 2004 to 2006 or so, and got shelved as just kind of a progenitor, as a precursor to Dwarf Fortress, which then developed for the subsequent decades and took off and is the game we know today. So basically, you know, with anything, when you're like a new developer of anything, you kind of work out the kinks on a first attempt, and then you're like, okay, now I know what these tools can do, what I'm capable of, and then you nail it on second or third or fourth try. And that's just the story here as well. So chapter 1 is, you can probably, knowing the Dwarf Fortress homebrew community, everybody who plays Dwarf Fortress is a little bit of a computer programmer in their own right. So I'm sure you can find this game if you want to, but it's not being actively offered or developed or anything like that. Helpless or hopeless? This is an Easter egg that existed from the very first version of Dwarf Fortress up to version 47.05. It has been removed from the Steam release because it's a little unprofessional, or it's a little confusing at least. It's a little bit too much in the spirit of losing is fun. It kind of teases you if you're confused, but anyway, so what it is, in many places of the game, pressing a question mark icon brought you to the help menu named Dwarf Fortress the Manual, containing many instructions and help sections about the game. If you pressed question mark again, while already inside the help menu, you would get the manual text viewer screen. This was designed to teach the player how to navigate in text menus with practice links, basically teaching you how to use the help menu. Pressing enter on one of those brought up the manual good job screen saying you have successfully navigated a text link. You can see why they took this out for the Steam release. It is very trollsome. It's basically teasing somebody as they get increasingly confused. But so if you pressed question mark one more time while being in the manual text viewer screen, this brought up the manual text viewers again screen with the message, you have pressed the help key from the text viewer help screen. Press escape to go back to that screen. I don't know how to explain it any better. So yeah, just kind of like a sassy, like I can't help you anymore, triple nested error message, which is cute, but yeah, you take that out when you're really ready to go prime time. Unless your game is very sarcastic, which you can make the argument that Dwarf Fortress is. Leave in the comments if you think they shouldn't have taken that out. Oh, to be fair, on that third one, it would also link you to Bay 12 Games to ask more people if you're still confused. So it didn't completely hang you out to dry. But pressing question mark a fourth time, after already being sent to the forums to ask your question in person, would bring up the manual helpless or hopeless screen with the message, you have pressed the help key many times. You only need to press the help key once. No matter how urgent your problem may seem at the time, press escape to go back to the previous screen. Despite my promises to have the help key to work on any screen, it doesn't work on this screen because you're nested 4 times in. If you're having technical trouble, it tells you to go to the forum again and ask for help on the forums. And indeed, the question mark key at that point no longer works.
Immortal Catatonia. So as mentioned before, sapient creatures at human-like intelligence, elves, dwarves, goblins, they can go insane under various conditions, often involving too much stress, or they failed a strange mood. They were so inspired, but the world could not bear their genius, and so they crash out of society and their life. One of the possible insanities is catatonic, where the afflicted will completely stop moving and do nothing but stare blankly into space until they eventually starve or dehydrate to death. However, some creatures can be immortal or become immortal, and then they don't need to eat or drink. For example, vampires or necromancer experiments, more on that later. This means that an immortal who becomes catatonic is doomed to become an unmoving cabbage, as the write-up puts it, wherever this initially occurred for seemingly the rest of existence. Quite possibly one of the most horrifying concepts if you linger on that thought a bit too long, although one can wonder if catatonic immortals eventually stop thinking at some point. So basically, if you're immortal, if you have no need for food or drink or oxygen, and you become catatonic, you exist as a living thing with neither thoughts nor prospect of recovery. It's kind of an eternal prison. It's dark. It's going to get darker as we keep going. On a lighter note, Kobold sieges. So by default, Kobold are not flagged to be able to siege fortresses of any settlement. If a civilization is near your fort, they'll occasionally send off thieves, and if they steal enough, they might send ambush parties to steal even more. But although they're a major race in the game, they will never conduct outright sieges on yours or anyone's settlements. Unlike humans, elves, goblins, who will eventually, thieves will become raiding parties, will become ambushes, will become sieges. But not for kobolds. They're a little too peaceful or a little too unorganized. Write-up ads. That being said, simply editing the raws to give kobolds the flag for sieging will enable this behavior. Although it's unclear why you would want to do this, because kobold sieges are laughably pathetic and their ambushes are much, much worse. So basically, you can insist that kobolds siege. They normally don't, and they will do their best, but they'll have no specific code for it, so they'll show up and get rocked, because it's not coded in. Alright, also, another lighter entry. You hear a low boom. So this is another funny one. This refers to the message some players see in adventure mode. It's very ominous, very scary, often accompanied by you hear a metal ching. Players often speculate if this message, obviously that's super scary. That sounds like something huge is about to come get you. Players often speculate it's a giant creature like a bronze colossus or a titan, or maybe a distant lightning strike. Something major happened. But it is in fact just again, I think in tier 1 or 2 we talk about this, like some birds are coated in with, and fish, some birds and fish are coated in with quirks that make them very detailed in a funny way. But so this is the mating call of the kakapo, which is a parrot species like the kia, basically flightless kias it notices, and they don't steal things. Parrot species from New Zealand are coded in with strange importance, and they show up multiple times on this iceberg. You hear a low boom, and then a metal ching is apparently this animal's mating call. And it's a parrot sound, but it'll freak you out in adventure mode the first time you hear it. Hey guys, if you made it this far, feel free to like and subscribe. We're doing more of this. We got many more tiers to go. All right, right back into the content. Plainact. Now this is an interesting one. Plainact is the most epic artifact ever made. It is a limestone statue with 8,722 words, an incredibly valuable and ornate artifact that was produced as the result of a glitch, which has now been mostly patched, although, as we're going to talk about, mega artifacts can still possibly be produced in certain situations. But it comes down to little quirks in the way that artifacts, special mood, legendary items are created. There's a few little glitches that can make it become like recursively complex and take nearly infinite amounts of materials. All right, but before I get ahead of myself, so Plainact itself is a limestone statue. The description of it alone is 8,722 words. And this write-up also notes, this description also contains what would appear to be the entire history of the world in which it was created. It also includes 73 images of itself, meaning that it is somehow recursive, physically recursive, leading one to believe that either the designs engraved on it are minutely fractal, or that where Plainact stands, the universe folds, which is they're being a little cheeky, funny. But yeah, it contains 73 depictions of itself, which does imply that it has some kind of physical recursive value. And that's going to make more sense when we see what it's made out of. So it has a whopping value of over 3 million dwarf bucks, which is extremely high in relation to its rather mundane materials. When this first happened, it was a mystery. People didn't really understand how it had happened, what the player had done to make that happen. The first clue came when another player unwittingly created boiled princes, which was another mega artifact. So you can even put like mega artifact as its own iceberg item. Plainact is just kind of the first and one of the greatest examples of this phenomenon, but we're talking about mega artifacts here. So the original bug was that the source of these artifacts was a moody dwarf who claims an outdoor workshop when dwarves are not allowed outside will continue gathering materials for their artifact without ever crossing any of those materials off of their list of items. They will only gather materials from inside locations and will do so until no more of that item remain. So if dwarves are allowed outside, they will complete their current item and move on to the next. In version 0.31 and later, where the stay indoors order was removed, the same can be accomplished instead by using burrow restrictions. In this case, the workshop is claimed outside the burrow, and only items inside the burrow will be collected. So basically, if you give them some kind of area designation that doesn't jive, that doesn't fit with the workshop they want to get to, they might get in a loop where they are collecting items, and then they're collecting items almost on a loop forever for as long as this system exists. And then because they collected so much, that'll then be built into the artifact. If they collected 73 boulders, then you bet that special artifact is going to have 73 boulders worth of content in it. The main bug responsible for this was fixed in Dwarf Fortress version 40, so this is no longer reproducible in current versions. However, some Plainact-like items, mega artifacts, have been created since the bug has been fixed. Even in premium version 50.11, it's speculated that these mega artifacts are currently caused by guildhall zones overlapping workshops. So basically, just zones can cause special artifact quirks that make them pull magnitudes more source materials and then be magnitudes more detailed and large and valuable. ASCII art reward. Previously, when you sent a donation to Bay 12 Games, you could choose between two rewards, a crayon art reward or an ASCII art reward. The ASCII art was a small scene made of a few ASCII characters. If you're not familiar with that pronunciation, the ASCII, basically the matrix screen style where everything's represented in hashtags and other special symbols and stuff, letters. That's what I'm talking about when we say ASCII. People should know at this point in the Dwarf Fortress Iceberg about ASCII, but anyway. For these ASCII art rewards you would get when you donated to Bay 12 Games. So when you donated to Bay 12 Games, if you chose basically, 3-Toe would either draw you something in crayon or he'd make you an ASCII art as a thank you. These ASCII art rewards would come with a unique story written by 3-Toe occurring in the Dwarf Fortress world. So each scene had a chance to appear later in some form in one of Three Toes' stories. If the same donor donated more than once, it was also possible that the bits of ASCII art would follow each other and form a story. So basically, if you donated consistently to Bay 12 and told Three Toe, keep working on this story that I'm commissioning through donations, he would do that, and you could have some really special art from the creators. On February 1st, 2020, the Addams brothers announced that they would not be doing rewards after that month. You can browse existing rewards on the DF Wiki. So basically, this is a fun thing you missed out at this point throughout development. Donations, you'd either get a crayon drawing or some custom ASCII art and storytelling from Three Toe, the main game designer, I believe. I think that's right? Toady is the main dev, and then Three Toe is the main designer, something like that. Anyway, one of the brothers Addams. That would have been that'd be a cool thing to own. I probably would have donated if I had been aware of it back in the day. Morul Cattenmat is also known as the most interesting dwarf in the world. Morul is the result of the Bay 12 forum user Martin, who aimed to turn a simple fish dissector and animal dissector dwarf into a super competent dwarf, who is legendary in every skill possible in Fortress mode. It took Martin 63 in-game years to turn this near-useless dwarf into a demigod able to drive out entire sieges alone, and he achieved this by making him do basically all the work in the fortress all by himself. So that's fun. Morul Cattenmat, the most interesting dwarf in the world, as created by Martin, Bay 12 forum user. Room Carnage. Room Carnage is a version .34 fortress presented in the style of a serialized epic. It started in June 2014 and is still ongoing, or at least it has not been confirmed to be discontinued as of February 2025. It chronicles the rise of the dwarves of the momentous Die in a particularly interesting embark location, a terrifying glacier volcano that rains elf blood. The most notable feature of the fortress is the ongoing weaponization of the volcano itself, which was finally realized in the 22nd installment. You can read the full story on the Bay 12 forums. It has its own thread. It also has its own external site. It actually has its own domain. So if you type in Room Carnage, all one word, and Dwarf Fortress, you can find that and read all about it. Arch Crystal. This is another epic story about a player who played 500 in-game years in the same fortress. After settling in an evil jungle, dwarves here accomplished some of the most epic feats in a huge intergenerational tale, such as taming and training an army of cave dragons. Arch Crystal is also notable that in 500 years, they managed to colonize a circus with cave dragons. So that's cool. That's very cool. Dwarf Fortress inspired Minecraft. Notch, the creator of Minecraft, has talked many times about his various inspirations for making Minecraft, which include Roller Coaster Tycoon, Dungeon Keeper, and of course, Dwarf Fortress. One of his personal projects before Minecraft was called Ruby Dung, a base building game inspired by Dwarf Fortress, but as an isometric three-dimensional game like Roller Coaster Tycoon. Reviewers often consider Minecraft to be more user-friendly than Dwarf Fortress. Imagine that. It is a lot more user-friendly than Dwarf Fortress, especially at the time even when Minecraft was new, Dwarf Fortress was still a pain in the neck to play sometimes. Tarn Adams says he is thankful for the Minecraft developers citing Dwarf Fortress because that drew more players to his game. Upon the game's Steam release, many indie game developers came out to praise Dwarf Fortress and cite its influence on their own games. This includes the developers of Terraria, Caves of Qud, Prison Architect, and Project Zomboid. Homages to Dwarf Fortress also appear in World of Warcraft. Masterwork. Now, if you've played Dwarf Fortress, you're familiar with Masterwork is the highest quality. It's when anything, a barrel or a mug, is really done just perfectly, expertly. Now, that's not what this entry is about, however. Masterwork Dwarf Fortress is a massive mod package for versions up to 44. It adds over 300 buildings, over 6,000 reactions, over 1,000 creatures, and up to 35 races, as well as new industries and materials, magic, more military systems, more interactions in the world. It's a huge mod. I've actually never tried this. It sounds kind of cool. Now, put a pin in that, though, because as we're going to see, so it was previously very popular. It was a major popular mod among players of Dwarf Fortress, but it is a little controversial. Not everybody played it. I never heard of it, honestly, so I missed out on this back in those versions. I'm reading from the write-up here. It says the modding community was quite split over it for a long time, with some unaffiliated modders outright quitting due to lack of attention, since Masterwork usually had all the attention. There were also issues with occasional bugginess. I'm not surprised with a mod that big. Numerous delays and a complete lack of unifying theme, it was essentially an anything goes mod pack where everything is thrown in. And then the head of the project, apparently, I'm just reading from this write-up, disappeared for 2 years or so due to personal issues. And then there was also controversy about some of the texture packs may have had lifted art or something like that. So it's a controversial but important mod package. Headshoots and Syrup Leaf. Like Boat Murdered, Headshoots was a succession game made by members of Something Awful. We covered that in Tier 1. So basically guys in Something Awful, people in Something Awful, like playing a year of the game, trading it to the next person, and passing this game around in a circle until it's a really interesting map. Headshoots is full of good insanity, like any good Dwarf Fortress story. Syrup Leaf is the sequel succession game taking place in the same universe, being even longer and even more epic than its predecessor. So basically, there was a world, in World Gen, you create a world, and then you can play multiple fortresses as much as you like. Headshoots and Syrup Leaf were sister, Something Awful, successive game, shared game fortresses that just turned out really cool and crazy, as always happens when people share a Dwarf Fortress file and keep playing it. Giant Desert Scorpion. Now this is an amazing one. I hadn't heard of this actually either. I hadn't encountered these. The Giant Desert Scorpion was a rare, large, aggressive, and dangerous creature found in most savage desert biomes. The above-ground equivalent of the giant cave spider. Now I know what you're thinking, not that interesting yet. I want to get to the neurotoxin. When I read this, it was like blowing my mind. So their most dangerous asset is their stinger. They are capable of injecting a neurotoxin which causes necrosis of the brain and nervous system. And if you play Dwarf Fortress, you know that's not just saying like, oh, that's what neurotoxins do. Specifically, every organ is simulated. Every part of the body, every part of anatomy is simulated. Literal generated necrosis of the brain and nervous system, which would result in instant death once completely rotted, though suffocation due to respiratory paralysis was likely to occur first. See, this is why Dwarf Fortress is so great, is because it really does simulate those systems. So you get a authentic neurotoxin experience when these scorpions would sting you. So, and this is the part that really made it creep me out. So you're stung with this neurotoxin, and instant death if the brain and nervous system completely rot, of course, because you have no brain or nervous system. But usually what happens is respiratory paralysis from the fact that the brain is damaged, causing suffocation through respiratory paralysis as the brain continues to rot, and before it's completely destroyed, of course, it ceases to function as well. And death usually occurred in 19 in-game hours. So that's like, that's so creepy. Imagine that, like, you're fighting these things, they're common. So that's another thing that this write-up mentions, is you don't have to worry about them now. They were removed from the game as of version 42 because they were literally, like, too hard, which is a strange thing to say for Dwarf Fortress, but they felt no fear or pain. They were giant, they were armored, and literally their first attack is just to inject you with poison, which ceases your combat, and then you die in agony over the course of the next day. Anything with blood and a nervous system. Elephants, giants, dragons. I don't know, I don't think demons have blood. I didn't want to work on a demon, I don't think. Correct me in the comments if that's wrong. So yeah, they were literally so hardcore that they got taken out. There are plans for a replacement in a future update, something that's tuned a little more fairly. Although that is so cool. You just got to make them rarer. It's got to be like a, almost like a legendary beast tier, where it's like every once in a while, your whole fortress has to deal with one of these. Then it would be fair, but also devastating. But yeah, so amazing. These things were previously just wandering every desert, every savage desert, and everything was getting one hit, basically. As soon as you were stung, you were done. The Littlest Cheesemaker. The Littlest Cheesemaker is an illustrated interactive story on Bay 12 forums chronicling the adventures of Mistum Wheeldream Colnazum, aka Misty. She's on a quest to become a legendary cheesemaker. It allows forum members to interact with the story, so basically it's like it's a very fun, charming D&D style, everybody working together to tell an interesting story about a little dwarf named Misty who dreams of cheese, dreams of legendary cheese. And that's all we have for Tier 3, guys. If you made it this far, thank you for joining me. Feel free to like and subscribe, leave a comment if I explained anything wrong, or if you just want to talk to me about any of these topics, I write people back. Thank you all for joining me. Love you.